Hari Om, everyone.
Hari Om, sir.
Morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Or for those of you who are not in India, good evening or good afternoon, wherever you are.
Hari
Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om,
Hari Om,
Utsav.
sir. Hari Om,
Good
sir.
morning.
Hari Om,
Hari
sir.
Om.
Hari Om.
Okay, let's start. Om Pratasmarami Hridhi Samsfuradaatmatattvam Satchit Sukham Paramaham Sagatim Turiyam Yat Swapna Jagara Sushuptimavaiti Nityam Tad Brahma Nishkalamaham Nacha Bhuta Sangaha तपोभिक्षीण पापानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणां मुमुक्षूणामपेक्षोऽयम् आत्मबोधो विधीयते बोधोऽन्यसाधनेभ्यो हि साक्षान्मोक्षैकसाधनम् पाकस्य वह्निवज्ञानं विना मोक्षो न सिद्ध्यति. Okay, we start the class with any questions. Are there any questions from the previous class or anything anybody would like to ask? Okay, great. So we had just started the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita in the previous class. All the stage is set for battle, and in the middle of the battlefield. So the Bhagavad Gita begins with, I'll just recall your memory, the Bhagavad Gita begins with a question from Dhritarashtra, who is the father of the Kauravas, one of the two clans, one of the two cousins, the Kauravas and the Pandavas. The father of the Kauravas is called Dhritarashtra. So he is blind and he is not in the battlefield. He is sitting away in the palace along with his along with Sanjaya, his charioteer, his associate, who has been given the capacity to observe what is happening in the middle of the battlefield by sage Vyasa. So he's been given this capacity to witness it from afar, and so Dhritarashtra is curious. He wants to know what is happening on the field of Kurukshetra. So the first verse of the Bhagavad Gita begins with the famous words Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha. I'm eager to know what is happening on the Dharma Kshetra of Kurukshetra. Very famous verse actually, and the first word of the Bhagavad Gita itself begins with the term Dharma. Dharma Kshetra Kurukshetra. Kshetra means field. So Dharma Kshetra means this field of Dharma. Again, Dharma is a very deep word, perhaps one of the deepest words in this tradition. Broadly, it means one's values, one's beliefs. It means the values with which you uphold yourself, you live your life. So your values are your dharma. And when you live with a sense of values, when society lives with values, it becomes a dharma kshetra. Means it becomes a field of dharma when dharma is upheld. The interesting thing is that because of the fall of dharma, because of adharma, because of misrule, because of choices made by the ruling class, which are the Kauravas, this dharma kshetra had fallen into a kurukshetra, had fallen into a field of battle, a field of strife, a field of discontent, a field of discord. So when dharma is followed, where wherever dharma is followed, there is a sense of peace. In a family where dharma is followed, there is a sense of peace and prosperity. There is a sense of safety, security, growth. And where there is adharma, there is agitation, there is discontent, there is a lack of direction, there is a sense of strife. This is true at an individual level, at a collective level. If you live your life with a sense of values, you will have clarity, you will have stability. And if you don't follow dharma, you will be lost, confounded, agitated. So some of you may have heard actually about the four goals of human life. At some point, it's a pretty well-known and popular fact. When you talk about Hinduism, the four goals of a Hindu, right? What are the four goals as a Hindu that you have? And first and foremost is dharma. Whether it's your personal values, your collective values, social values. Now, a lot of dharma is what are values coming from the past, what are values being trickled down from generation to generation. But ultimately, to have your own sense of values, you have to apply your own buddhi. Dharma cannot be imposed upon you. It's something that has to be invoked from you. It cannot be something that is followed and followed mechanically, right? So we have to learn from our past. We have to learn from the practices of our predecessors, and even refine and improve on our own understanding of what is dharma. The scriptures broadly give a a set of dharmas. Throughout the Bhagavad Gita, you'll come across values which one as an individual should uphold. So what are the values which an individual should uphold to ensure personal growth, to ensure peace and prosperity, to ensure social harmony, right? All of these collectively form the dharma of our society. And following a path of dharma, following a path of virtue and righteousness. So when you are following dharma, you are righteous. When you're not following dharma, you are unrighteous, right? So when you follow dharma, following dharma, you ought to pursue artha and kama. So the other goals of a human life are artha and kama. Artha means wealth, kama means desire, pleasure. Very interesting. So wealth and pleasure are sanctioned, so to say, when you talk about an individual's goals in life. These are not taboo. Money is not taboo in the Indic faith, in this tradition. Pleasure is not taboo. We think of pleasure and money as something that is sinful. Someone who enjoys money is someone who is not spiritual. That's not the case. It's just not the case. In fact, it's a very it's a very Abrahamic concept, to shun. It's interesting because a lot of us have the idea that spirituality in this country means renunciation. And renunciation, I'm not going to start on that because it's going to open another can of worms. But broadly, renunciation, we find renunciates only in Rishikesh, You have to be dressed simply in an ochre robe or something. And unless and until you have these matted locks, those dreadlocks, so to say. You're not a renunciate. So we have funny ideas of what it means to be spiritual or what it means to be a renunciate altogether in this country, in this tradition. But that's not the case. Artha and Kama are very much goals of an individual's life, all depending upon your temperament, all depending upon your vasanas, your inner nature, right? But Artha and Kama ought to be pursued in accordance to Dharma, with a sense of values, upholding certain values. If Artha and Kama are pursued indiscriminately without Dharma, what does that mean? That means pursuing wealth indiscriminately, unscrupulously, crossing certain boundaries, not keeping a check on your greed. That means being sensual without a sense of control, indulgence, indiscriminate indulgence, consent, not being consensual, doing anything for one's own sense gratification, not thinking about another person's comfort. Adharma, right? So the Dharma draws the boundaries for us in which to pursue Artha and Kama. It gives us the direction with which to pursue Artha and Kama. It gives us the dimension, it gives us a sense of perspective with which to pursue and enjoy Artha and Kama. If you pursue wealth and pleasure within the guidance of Dharma, your life will be wonderful. So if you have a sense of values with which you pursue these, your life will be wonderful. If you lack that, you'll be like a chicken running without a head. You'll be unhappy despite having a lot of wealth. You'll be unhappy despite enjoying a lot of pleasures, right? And ultimately all this has to conclude somewhere. At some point we have to stop and ask ourselves, what on earth are we doing? Quite literally. So while we enjoy Artha and Kama in a spirit of Dharma, the knowledge of life and living as given out by Vedanta will help us to pursue the fourth goal, the most important goal, the ultimate goal of human life, which is moksha. So while we get along our business of enjoying wealth and pleasure, that's not all there is to life. It's not that these things are meaningless, but a person who doesn't grow above these and get onto the path of moksha is living an unfulfilled life, an incomplete life. In the Upanishads, it says it's a life wasted. A life that isn't directed towards moksha, a life that isn't directed towards discovering the ultimate truth of life, is a life that is wasted. It's an incomprehensible loss. Mahati Vinashti, the actual term used in the Upanishad is Mahati Vinashti. It's the greatest of greatest losses. If all our lives we simply dwindle in Artha and Kama, but don't look beyond. For what? What's our purpose? What are we really looking for? And when you ask those questions, you enter the domain of Vedanta. You enter the domain of Upanishadic knowledge, right? The Upanishads are interested primarily in moksha, to helping you on your journey to evolve from Artha and Kama to your journey of moksha. So Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre. In this land of Dharma, which has fallen into a land of strife. What's happening? That was Dhritarashtra's question. And what we saw was, first Sanjay is telling about Duryodhan, right? Who's arrayed in front of his army, and he's talking to Dronacharya, his guru. So we were just concluding that, and we were beginning to analyze what is Duryodhan's state of mind, right? We sensed a little bit of arrogance, we sensed a little bit of fear, and we'll continue from that in verse number 9. Anye cha bahava shuraha मदर्थे त्यक्तजीविताः नानाशस्त्रप्रहरणाः सर्वे युद्धविशारदाः अन्ये च बहवः शूराः मदर्थे त्यक्तजीविताः नानाशस्त्रप्रहरणाः सर्वे युद्धविशारदाः. So Duryodhana is talking to Dronacharya, his guru, in the army of the Kauravas, and he's talking about the various. First, he described the various leaders of the Pandava army, and then he counted among his own army the leaders, and now he's concluding. He's saying, and besides all the other heroes, there are so many other heroes who have given up their lives for my sake, armed with various weapons and missiles, all well skilled in battle. So we were just analyzing a little bit about Duryodhana's state of mind, and you begin to see out here also, for my sake. The phrase used is Madarthe, for me. All these heroes who have come into the Kaurava army for my sake. So as we said, a Raja, today we live in a democracy and we speak a certain language, but back in the day when under a monarchy of sorts, the idea was that a monarch is a sort of a special position which is God-given almost, right? And a monarch is actually fulfilling, in some ways, Lord's role or doing God's work, right? So when a monarch gets too proud of his position, begins to abuse his power, begins to become too egoistic, he actually falls from that place of being a true righteous monarch, right? So you see this sense of egoism in Duryodhan. A king is a position, it's not a person. Just as a leader is a position, it's not a person. If a person tries to become bigger than the position, then he actually becomes unfit for that position. A principal in a school is a position, it's not a person. A president in a country or a prime minister in a country is a position, it's not a person. A person has to live up to that position. It's a very different thing. But when a person becomes too full of themselves, right, they begin to think that everything revolves around them, then they fail to live up to that position. They fail to become, they cease to become qualified for that position. So you have that sense in Duryodhan right now. He is a king and everyone is subject, loyal to the kingdom, not to Duryodhan. But he's personalizing it. He's saying all these people are here for my sake. Dronacharya had not given up his life for Duryodhan's sake. Dronacharya was fighting as a subject of the kingdom, right? We had mentioned last time in the class that all these leaders also, Dronacharya, Bhishma, they were all at a position where maybe if you look at it objectively from a moralistic perspective, they would have wanted to be on the Pandava side, right? But as subjects of the kingdom, they were bound by their duty to be fighting for the kingdom, which is the Kaurava side. But Duryodhan misunderstands and misrepresents that as they have given up their life for my sake. He's putting himself above the position, right? When a person begins to assume themselves to be bigger than the position they occupy, that's the beginning of the end, right? In whatever role you are playing, understand that you have to live up to the role and not the other way around. Life is giving you an opportunity to play a certain role. Do it to the best of your abilities and take it up as a responsibility rather than a privilege, right? Because nobody is indisputable of sorts, right? Nobody is irreplaceable. Nature will replace you if you cease to be fit for that position. And he continues. Aparyaptam tadasmakam Balam Bhishma Bhirakshitam Paryaptam Tvidime Tesham Balam Bhima Bhirakshitam Aparyaptam Tadasmakam Balam Bhishma Bhirakshitam Paryaptam Tvidime Tesham Balam Bhima Bhirakshitam. This army of ours, protected by Bhishma, is unlimited, whereas that army of theirs, protected by Bhima, is limited. So Duryodhan continues his conversation with Dronacharya, and he remarks something very curious. He says, look at this army of ours. On the one hand, he called the Pandava army grand, mighty, when he began his... and out here he seems to provide himself a sense of reassurance. Look at my unlimited army. Whereas that army of Bhima is limited. Right? So he's trying to reassure himself that actually he is on the stronger side. These are all indicative of Duryodhan's sense of insecurity, a slight sense of insecurity that's going on in his mind. So if you were to read the commentary out here, there's a double meaning to the word Paryapt and Aparyapt. Look at this army protected by Bhishma. Our army is Aparyapt, unlimited. Whereas Pandava army is Paryapt, limited. And then another way to look at Aparyapt is insufficient, whereas Paryapt means sufficient. When you look at it that way, Aparyapt means insufficient, Paryapt means sufficient. It totally flips the meaning. This army of ours is insufficient, their army is sufficient. So a play of words, it really, sometimes when we, the choice of words we use indicates our state of mind, right? So when you take a double meaning to this, it indicates Duryodhan's state of a slight insecurity, a sense of fear, right? Wherever there is ego, wherever there is selfishness, there will be fear. Wherever there is ego, wherever there is selfishness, there will be fear, no matter how strong a position you are in. Because you will feel threatened, because you will have a sense of a fear of losing, right? So it's a worthy it's worth analyzing what actually causes fear. One of the chief reasons of fear is a sense of selfishness. Selfishness means I, me, my way or the highway. And that was Duryodhan's attitude. And if you are selfish, there will be fear. There are other reasons as well. If you are vicious, if you are destructive, if you cause harm to others, you will always have that sense of fear. If you have a habit of harming others, doing ill to others, you will always feel that the same will be reciprocated to you. If you are kind and if you are gentle with others, you will not have fear. It's interesting how it works, how the mind works. If you're attached, see, you may not be vicious and you may not be selfish. You say, okay, I don't fall into these categories. I'm a very nice person. I'm a very gentle soul. Okay, you may be a gentle soul, you may be a very nice person, but if you're attached, you'll be afraid. What is attachment? You should ask. We throw around this word called attachment. Attachment is a mental bondage, a state of dependency. Mental dependence is attachment. When you are mentally dependent, when you cling to things, when you cannot do without it, when you've created a sense of dependency. In chapter 2, we'll come to a beautiful definition of attachment, a beautiful description of attachment. But in general, attachment is a state of mental dependency. The extent to which you are mentally dependent, you cannot do without, you will have fear. If you feel a sense of otherness, so you may be a nice person, but you feel a sense of otherness, you have a clannish mentality. Otherness can be physical, can be material. You could be class sensitive. You could look at others from a different religion or a different culture as a sense of otherness. You'll always have a sense of fear. If someone looks very different from you or comes from a totally very different culture, your immediate response is a sense of fear. That's why those who see, you go to a new land, you go to a new place, you have a sense of otherness from those who you see around you. There is fear. You meet someone and you are measured in the way you speak and what you reveal to them, because there's a sense of fear. And overall, if you are ignorant, where there is ignorance, where there is a lack of knowledge, a lack of awareness, there is fear. The first time you go to the airport, you don't know how Digi Yatra works. Huh? You'll reach 4 hours before. Sometimes I have to travel with such people. They make me reach the airport 3.5 hours. They don't realize half my life is spent at the airport. I can reach the airport 44 minutes before the flight, 30 minutes before the flight. Okay, I'm not bragging. But the point is, where there's a lack of knowledge, you'll be afraid. And so you'll want to go to the airport. You don't know how the check-in line works. You don't know how the security check works. You don't know what all you'll have to face out there. Imagine yourself, the first time you're going to the airport. People land a day in advance. So where there's ignorance in general, where there's ignorance, there is fear. So there are multiple reasons. One of the prime reasons for fear is selfishness. If you're selfish, you're going to be afraid. And that's Duryodhana's state of mind. He was broadly a selfish person. Sure, there were virtues about Duryodhana as well. See, that's the beauty of our culture. We don't paint anyone as a total demon, right? There are good things about Duryodhana. There are not so good things about Duryodhana. But broadly speaking, he was a kamsa, a selfish person. So he had a sense of fear.
Isn't selfishness and attachment same coins, the same sides of a coin?
Selfishness, attachment, egoism, they are different flavors of each other, right? If you have to really pull hairs, if you have to really analyze them, they are different. They are different shades of the same thing. Egoism, attachment, selfishness are if you really look into attachment, there is actually mindness, a selfishness that's there, right? So yes, absolutely. And he continues. Ayaneshu cha sarveshu yatha bhagam avasthitaha bhishmameva bhirakshantu bhavantas sarva eva hi. Ayaneshu cha sarveshu yatha bhagavam asthitaha bhishmameva bhirakshantu bhavantas sarva eva hi. And stationed in your respective positions in all your divisions, all of you, guard Bhishma alone. So he's telling his generals, Duryodhana is telling his generals, please guard Bhishma alone. Again, an expression of fear. What if something happens to Bhishma? I'm doomed. And the reason for that is there is no unity in the Kaurava army. There's no actual cause that is holding them together. See, Duryodhana wasn't the king. Duryodhana wasn't the king. And there's only that much when, a state's subject, a kingdom subject is sort of going to be loyal to the kingdom. Only so long as, if a king continues to be unrighteous, if a king continues to do the wrong, they will lose their support, right? So Bhishma, he was the grandsire of sorts. He was an uncle. He was an uncle to the Kauravas and the Pandavas' parents. He was an uncle to granduncle to Pandu and Dhritarashtra. He was a sort of a towering figure in the Kuru dynasty, whom people respected, whom people wanted to be associated with, whom people were guided by, and for whom this Kaurava army was actually vaguely stuck together. So on the contrary, on the one hand, Duryodhan is arrogantly saying all of these people are giving their lives for my sake. In the same breath, he's saying, "But please guard Bhishma." If he was clear, if there was no fear, if he actually truly believed that people were there for him, he wouldn't have worried about all these things. Why should we guard Bhishma alone? Because Bhishma is actually the force that's holding it together, right? So he was made the commander of the army. Bhishma was made the commander of the Kaurava army because he was a force uniting all the various factions, right? And if Bhishma were to fall, it would actually cause a great sense of disarray, because people didn't believe in the leadership of Duryodhan, right? They were there because they believed in the leadership of Bhishma and the leadership of Dronacharya, but they didn't have a sense of confidence in Duryodhan, right? Bhishma the terrible. The story of the Mahabharata actually begins with Bhishma's father. If you were to read the Mahabharata, Mahabharata is not only about the 18 days of the war, it's a long drama, multi-generation drama. It had many seasons.
Movie.
Huh?
Like a Hindi movie.
Like a Hindi movie. It has many. So it begins with the story of Bhishma's father, Shantanu, right? And Bhishma takes a terrible vow because Shantanu was interested in another woman, right? And Bhishma was the child of Shantanu. So the other woman said, "I will not marry you because I know that my children will never become king. So what's the point of marrying you?" "Oh, but I love you," said Shantanu. And so Bhishma took a terrible vow. He's like, "Look, because of me, my father's pleasure is being denied. I will take a vow." And there's the reason he's being given the name Bhishma, the terrible, because it's a terrible vow. One of the reasons he took the vow, he's such an able leader, he said, "I will never become king." He took a terrible vow, "I will never marry, I will never become king." He had a savior complex, Bhishma. He wanted to be the savior. He wanted to see, classic example of wanting to do good for another person, to cater to another person, but actually it having bad consequences, right? We often take unselfishness to mean to cater to another person. That's not what unselfishness means. Bhishma was pandering to his father. Sorry to say. Was catering to his father's desires. But that's not truly unselfish. Because simply catering to another's whims and fancies may have detrimental consequences. So when we use the word unselfish, when we say you should be unselfish, we don't mean that you should simply cater to another person's tantrums, right? You should think about the well-being of the other. That's what it means to be truly unselfish. Sometimes thinking about their well-being means doing what is not what they don't want. And that's for your intellect to decide. What is in उनके हित में क्या है, right? What is in their well-being versus what they want.
Actually, he is emotionally became a prisoner of his own, खुश करने के लिए ही, अपने बाप को खुश करने के लिए.
Exactly.
And he still remains to be the hero of the Mahabharata also.
Absolutely. And that only goes to show he was such an able commander, able leader. Had he been the king, it would have been a totally different kingdom. It wouldn't have fallen into a conflict between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. See, the Pandu and Dhritarashtra were, their father was the stepbrother of Bhishma. if I'm not wrong. I may be missing a generation, but they were from the lineage of the step brothers of Bhishma.
Yeah,
You're right.
And it's because Bhishma took that vow that, Father, please marry. I am never going to become king. I don't want it. Who are you to take that vow? If life has a certain plan for you, if life has a certain, responsibility to give unto you, so it's terrible because on one hand, it's a great vow to actually, it requires a great sense of sacrifice, but it's actually counterproductive. It didn't help anyone. It just pandered to a temporary desire of Shantanu, nothing else. And it caused all this drama. So,
अगर दोनों एपिक को कंपेयर किया जाए, रामायण में वो भी अपने फादर की आज्ञाकारी माना जाता है, राम, और उसकी बहुत पूजा होती है। अब इसने भी अपने बाप की आज्ञा मानी या उसकी विश मानी, तो ये इतना इसको उतना वो नहीं मिलता, उतना ख्याति नहीं मिली।
Because the cause is important. He was doing for the good.
yeah, it's worthy of analysis. You're quite right. On the one hand, Lord Rama ने दशरथ की आज्ञा मानी. इनफैक्ट दशरथ की आज्ञा नहीं थी,
हाँ,
दशरथ नहीं चाहते थे. यहाँ शांतनु चाहते थे. शांतनु was being selfish. दशरथ नहीं चाहते थे. So it's worth analysis. But I get what you're saying. It's an interesting comparison.
forced upon him actually by his wife.
Yeah.
Utsav, I have a question with this.
Yes.
Isn't this a very retrospective analysis that the choice which he made was bad? Because maybe at that point, maybe he thought that this was his purpose, right? Like, how do you know what your purpose is at the moment when you're making a choice?
Good question. No, absolutely. We are sitting comfortably and judging someone thousands of years later, retrospectively. But the only important conclusion one can make from here is that true unselfishness is not pandering to someone's whims and fancies. See, what is it that you're sacrificing for? For what purpose? Right? What will be the consequences of that? So that analysis.
Hariom, can I please add something? I've read somewhere about this analysis you're talking about. Actually, the problem is not that why they took that vow. कृष्ण जी ने उनके जब मृत्यु के टाइम पे पूछा था कि उन्होंने पूछा कि मेरे साथ इतना बुरा क्यों हुआ लाइफ में, तो उन्होंने कहा कि प्रॉब्लम ये नहीं थी कि आपने प्रतिज्ञा ली, प्रॉब्लम ये थी कि आपने उस प्रतिज्ञा का पालन करने के लिए धर्म का पालन नहीं किया. लाइक कृष्ण जी ने भी प्रतिज्ञा ली थी कि वो शस्त्र नहीं उठाएंगे, बट अल्टीमेटली धर्म की रक्षा करने के लिए उन्होंने शस्त्र उठाया. तो उन्होंने कहा कि मेरे लिए धर्म इंपॉर्टेंट है, मैं और मेरी प्रतिज्ञा इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है. लेकिन भीष्म पितामह के लिए मैं और मेरी प्रतिज्ञा इंपॉर्टेंट था, मेरा धर्म क्या था उस वक्त वो इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं था, इसलिए ख्याति नहीं मिली. राम जी ने अपने धर्म का पालन किया है.
Ego.
थैंक यू.
Well said. So, if you recall, I had said that there are 4 stages, right? Satyug, Treta Yug, Dwapar Yug, and Kali Yug. And in Satyug, Dharma is on all 4 legs. In Treta, Dharma is on 3 legs. So, Ramayana was from a time when, broadly, there was Dharma was followed. Dwapar there was a depletion of dharma, right? So when there is a depletion of dharma, and this is one of the biggest teachings of Lord Krishna also, that rules have to be bent because the other side is adharmic, right? So to follow dharma, you have to go by the spirit of the book, spirit of the law, rather than the letter of the law. That is perhaps one of the most important teachings of Lord Krishna by his own example. So what Rima ji is saying out here is absolutely right, that is the choice you're making in alliance with dharma, is it for, what are the consequences, not only for the individual but also for the collective, for the greater good? Is it actually for a worthy purpose, right? Or are you simply catering to So at many times you'll have to make you have to make choices in life, choices which impact your own personal life and those around you. On what basis are you simply making the choice and appearing sacrificial on your part to cater to someone's superficial whims, right? Or is there actually, a deeper purpose to that? So what we analyze out here is that it was a superficial whim of Bhishma's father. So rather than judging him, we're actually learning from his experience. Um,
Correct.
बुद्धा की लाइफ में भी एक स्टोरी है कि ही टुक ए वॉव कि 10 दिन का व्रत रखेंगे और अपने चेलों के साथ जा रहे थे। तो रास्ते में उनको एक उनका बहुत प्रेमी था, उसने अपना पूरा सारा कुछ बेच के उनके लिए खाना बनाया हुआ था। तो बुद्धा सेड ही एट। देन उनके साथियों ने बोला कि आपने क्या किया, आपने तो वाव लिया हुआ था। कहते हैं वाव तो मैंने लिया हुआ था, लेकिन ये मैं आई कैन पोस्टपोन माई दिस थिंग, बट उनकी इमोशन तो देखो। तो दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, किस भाव से उन्होंने उसको खाना खिलाया था, दैट इज मोर इम्पॉर्टेंट। तो भाव की भी कदर करनी चाहिए। पर इसमें क्या है कि लेडी की डिमांड थी कि भाई मेरे बच्चे को राज नहीं मिलेगा। तो ये
रामायण
नो, महाभारत में भी भीष्म
करेक्ट।
हाँ, लेडी की डिमांड थी, उसकी बाप की डिमांड ही नहीं थी। लेकिन लेडी ने कहा कि मेरा ये बेटा राज नहीं कर सकेगा। तो देन ही टुक वॉव बिकॉज टू प्लीज दैट लेडी मोर देन द फादर।
करेक्ट। सो
क्या इंपॉर्टेंट है हमको लाइफ में वो देखना है, ये बाकी चीजें तो अपनी जगह पर हैं ही।
also, Prachi, a worthy question to ask. See, just because you are occupying a position doesn't mean you necessarily are attached to that position, right? Bhishma may have been a better king,
Certainly.
and just because he would have been king doesn't mean he is attached to the kingdom or his position. So very often we are more interested in the act of in a show of kindness, in a show of unselfishness, rather than actually being kind and actually being unselfish, right? And we think we are actually very great, but actually it's not. So the question the question then comes as to, I mean, who are we to make that vow? Who are we to make that that decision? Is a king's whims and fancies sort of all important? These are all worthy questions to ask. So retrospectively, in our times, what is important to understand is, on what basis are we making certain decisions? Are we simply pandering to others whims and fancies? That's not true unselfishness, right? आप धर्म का पालन कर, as Rima ji said, आपके इस वाव के पालन करने में is actually dharma being followed or not? That is that is important to consider. So that's why you even retrospectively, if you analyze it, it would turn out to be a wrong decision. But who's to say? Protect Bhishma alone. Yeah.
So when Ramji was following his father's words, oath, then what was he trying to sort of uphold, or what was that? What was the purpose behind that?
See, in many ways, one would
प्राण जाए पर वचन ना जाए।
you have to that is precisely what he was saying कि मेरे पिताजी का वचन था, but you have to assess your environment and make these decisions, right? You have to see, when you are analyzing the dharma is contextual to your environment. right? So the environment, and broadly we say the period of the Ramayana was Treta Yuga, which is, broadly there was dharma being followed, right? Uh, Kekai having that desire was a rare occurrence, you know, um, um, specifically. So, you know, Ramji's decision has to be seen from that perspective. Whereas in this age, it's broadly said that Mahabharata was in the Dwapar Yuga when an allegiance to dharma was compromised, severely compromised. So in many ways the Mahabharata and its times are more relatable to our lives than the Ramayana, right? Although it is very contextual. You may be in certain families, you may be in certain family situations where uh, you know that sort of your environment is more Treta than Dwapar in that sense, right? So there's no hard and fast rule. I think there is something to learn from both decisions, right? Ultimately the it's your own buddhi which has to make a decision. What matters more is not the show of righteousness, the show of unselfishness, but actually genuinely from your point of intention being unselfish, right? We'll see in the Bhagavad Gita what matters not is what it's not the action that's important, but the intention behind it that matters more, right? So it's good to know, and it's good to be familiar with sort of both perspectives. They're not necessarily opposed to each other, but yeah, they also are from different times, as one would say. Yeah, Saurabh, you have a question.
सर जी, अभी तो हमने 2 जन्म डिस्कस किया है। आगे आगे देखिए, अभी अर्जुन भी करेगा। मैं अपने आप को जल्द समाधि ले लूंगा अगर वो सूरज अस्त होने तक, तो भगवान
Correct.
और वो भी है। फिर उसके बाद युधिष्ठिर भी बोला एक दफा कि मैं भी कर लूंगा, वो कर लूंगा।
हाँ
तो
जी।
whether it's foolishness
The
or
day before the war, the two days before the war, ये तो हम मतलब the day of the war we are talking about. The day before the war, Yudhishthir was also not wanting to fight. And ironically, it was Arjuna who convinced Yudhishthir just yesterday. Huh? Imagine, today is the war. Yes, yesterday Yudhishthir didn't want to fight. Arjuna is trying to convince Yudhishthir, listen, this is why you should fight. But what Arjuna tells Yudhishthir is very different from what Lord Krishna tells Arjuna. हाँ जी, yes, Saurav.
I just wanted to add to something, वो जो discuss हो रहा था about Bhishma's vow. See, if supposingly we go into this, that okay, he took the vow, which is fine. He took the vow at that day. Later on, to save dharma, he does not necessarily need to be king, right? Even if when you are not king, you can ensure what is right can be done. You don't need to support what is wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right, and I mean these are all sort of lessons and learnings. Although I'm sure in a monarchy, it has different consequences when you go against, say, the seat of power, right? As opposed to a democratic setup where you are sort of totally allowed to raise your questions and ask for answers, right to information or whatever. So you're absolutely right, and these are all learnings, right? Because ultimately we make things absolute, and it's very important to not make it absolute, right? So you're right that having taken a vow, there's no reason why one cannot reconsider, right? And one should always, having made a decision, not impulsively backtrack the decision, but absolutely review and assess whether the choices one has made is correct. That's certainly right. Okay, so please protect Bhishma alone. And then sensing all of this, sensing this sense of fear and sense of insecurity in Duryodhan. So Dronacharya, he knows that talking will not help, saying anything will not help. I have to cheer this guy up and I have to use something altogether different. So what he does is he blows his conch, right? So Drona blows his conch to shake Duryodhan out of his sense of anxiety. And once Drona blows his conch, everybody starts blowing their conches. It's like a battle cry, it's like a preparation for war, right? So the stage is set and we're at the 11th hour of battle, and now all the conches are getting blown, and soon the Mahabharata is going to begin. So verse number 12 to 19 broadly is about all sorts of conches that are going to be blowing. We'll take the next couple of verses, we'll chant it together, 3-4 verses, and we'll take it up. तस्य संजनयन् हर्षं कुरुवृद्ध पितामहः सिंहनादं विनद्योच्चैः शङ्खं दद्मौ प्रतापवान् ततः शङ्खाश्च भैर्यश्च पणवानकगोमुखाः सहसैवाभ्यहन्यन्त सशब्दस्तुमुलोऽभवत् ततः श्वेतैर्हयैर्युक्ते महती स्यन्दने स्थितौ माधवः पाण्डवश्चैव दिव्यौ शङ्खौ प्रदध्मतुः पाञ्चजन्यं ऋषिकेशः देवदत्तं धनञ्जयः पौण्ड्रं दध्मौ महाशङ्खं भीमकर्मावृकोदरः. So, sensing this in sense of fear in Duryodhan, so Bhishma, the aged Kuru, the grandsire Bhishma, he's sensing this sense of anxiety in Duryodhan, and what does he do? He raises a lion's roar and blows his conch to cheer him up. So he senses that Duryodhan is getting a little worried and anxious about the battle. So to shake him up, to cheer him up, he like a lion, he roars and blows his conch to show a sense of aggression. So you'll see this, Kshatriyas in general, you'll see this in the army. How's the Josh, right? To shake people up, and everyone says, "Hi, sir." So the moment you say, "Hi, sir," there's a sense of confidence and there's a sense of reassurance. So he blows his conch to cheer him up and to set the stage for battle. And then what happens? Then conches, kettle drums, cow horns, everything, they blared forth quite suddenly, and that night noise was tumultuous. The sudden noise was tumultuous. All of the decision to have the Mahabharata war, all the negotiations, all the concessions, all the deliberations, everything, all the preparations for war up till this point were happening, and now was the 11th hour. Was what was going to happen over the next 18 days was going to be terrible. It was going to be tumultuous, and that destruction is captured in this sort of tumultuous noise of all the conches. It is now irreversible. It's going to happen. Certain actions have been set forth, certain causes have been put into place, and the effects are inevitable. Now nothing can be done. Now no one can help. This tumultuous noise was a sign of what was to come over the next 18 days. And then, seated in the magnificent chariot yoked to white horses, Madhava and Pandava also blew their divine conches. So the first mention of Lord Krishna and Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita comes in the 14th verse. So Sanjay is describing what's happening, and he says, seated in a magnificent chariot yoked to white horses, Madhava and Pandava also blew their divine conches. Their conches are not divine in themselves, right? It's what is called in language, it's called a transferred epithet. The conches are divine because they are being blown by them. The conches are not divine in themselves, right? See, it's like this. You suppose Virat Kohli scores 100 with a particular bat. what happens immediately? After the match, he gifts the bat to someone, to a small kid in the stadium. Oh, it's a mighty bat. The bat is not mighty, the bat is a bat. Had he got out for 0, the bat would have been the same. Right? The bat is mighty because it has come from Virat Kohli. It's a transferred epithet. So similarly, the conches are not divine in themselves. So if I had the conch of Lord Krishna, something great would have happened. The conch is mighty because the conch is divine because it's being blown by Lord Krishna, Madhava, sweet, Madhu, sweet as Madhu, Madhava, another name for Lord Krishna. So seated in the magnificent chariot, yoked to white horses. There's a beautiful symbolism of this chariot as well. This chariot represents the body. This magnificent chariot represents the individual's body. The white horses, there are 5 horses. So there are not 4 horses. The actual chariot of Arjuna has 5 horses. And the 5 horses represent the 5 senses. The 5 senses are moving around in all directions. They are taking you from experience to experience. They are being attracted by the world. And they are also having a push to the world. So the horses are running in all directions. Now to control the horses, if the horses are not controlled, there will be a problem. So you have to have a control over the horses. Now the horses are tied using a rein. That rein represents the mind. And holding the rein is the charioteer. The charioteer represents the buddhi, the intellect, a capacity to think, reason, judge, decide. The mind is the seat of feelings, emotions. So beautiful symbolism out here. The senses are connected to your feelings and emotions. The feelings and emotions are controlled by your intellect, your capacity to think, reason, judge, decide. Now, if the charioteer, the one who is controlling the reins, holding the reins, is not powerful, is not strong, what will happen? The mind will be pulled away by the horses. The senses will take your emotions, will take your feelings for a ride. Your mind will give in to impulses based on passing experiences. Anything attractive, you'll fall for. Any small desire, any small attraction, you'll go astray. So the world is constantly attracting the horses, is constantly attracting the senses. If your intellect is not controlling the mind, you will give in to any and every experience. There'll be no discipline, there'll be no control, there'll be no regulation and moderation in your life. On the contrary, if you have a strong buddhi, a strong intellect, it will have a grip over the mind, and that will control the horse, that will control the senses. Your senses will be regulated, and you will be able to give your desires a direction. Your chariot will be steady, it will move and help you win the battle of life, right? So the magnificent chariot, the great chariot, it's a wonderful chariot. The body is a wonderful, wondrous equipment. The body is wonderful, it's incredible, the kind of things it is capable of. The senses are beautiful. The mind is wondrous, its capacity to feel, think. But if these are not guided correctly by the intellect, they can spell disaster. The same body which is wonderful can lead you to, your senses can cause your destruction. The same mind which is so incredible can cause your downfall. So the problem is not with the senses per se, the problem is not with the mind per se, the problem is not with your desires per se, but your inability to guide, direct, control, regulate, moderate them. If you are able to regulate, moderate, guide your desires, you'll be a philosopher. You're not able to do that.
मुझे अभी God's grace helps, I know. तो कहती है तो मेरे पास अभी 2 lakhs.
Okay. So if you're not able to guide, control, regulate, moderate your mind, you'll be agitated, you'll be stressed. So this wonderful, magnificent chariot, symbolizing the individual. And in that, Madhava and Pandava also blew their conches. And along with that, various other characters in the. So what were the conches? These conches are given names. Again, these are good to know, right? The Panchajanyam. So the conch blown by Lord Krishna. Again, another name is used for Lord Krishna in this verse, in verse number 15. Rishikesha. Rishikesha blew the Panchajanya. Dhananjaya, another name for Arjuna. Dhananjaya blew the Devadatta. And Vrikodara, which I believe is a name for Bhima, if I'm not wrong, he blew the Poundra, right? So Rishikesha, again, these names have a lot of symbolism, and in the next class I'll go into some of that. But you see, Madhava is a certain name, Rishikesha is a certain name. They're all different names for Lord Krishna. Similarly, Pandava is a name for Arjuna, and out here Dhananjaya, one who has gained victory over wealth, Dhananjaya is also a name for Arjuna. He blew the Devadatta. And other characters also, King Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, he blew the Ananta Vijaya. Nakula and Sahdev, they blew the Sughosha, they blew the Mani Pushpaka. The king of Kasi, an excellent archer, they also blew their conches. Drishtadumna, Virata, the Satyaki, all these, the invincible Satyaki, Drupada, the sons of Draupadi, the mighty armed sons of Shubhadra, all of them blew their respective conches. I'm skimming through all of this because there's nothing much to, there's nothing much philosophical in this. All of these things are good to know, and what did all of that cause? So that tumultuous sound, that terrible, terrible sound of the conches, the inevitable start of the Mahabharata, it rent the hearts of Dhritarashtra's host and made earth and sky reverberate. So it caused a great sense of fear. And for those who are in the wrong, there will always be a sense of fear. Whether it is Duryodhan, whether it is Dhritarashtra, heart and hearts they knew that they were unrighteous. And that's the meaning of Satyameva Jayate. When you're on the path of truth, you're free, you're light, your conscience is clear. When you're on the path of the unrighteous, there is a sense of guilt. On the outside, you may be very comfortable. You may appear very comfortable. You may be you may be unrighteous, but materially you may be prosperous, right? You may be enjoying the amenities and facilities of life. But deep inside, in your conscience, you're fighting a great battle. There's fear. There is guilt. So the tumultuous sounds, it sent a wave of fear through Duryodhan, through Dhritarashtra, and the earth and sky were reverberating, right? And then came the time we've been all waiting for. So in the next class, what we'll start is finally the discussion between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, where Arjuna will ask Lord Krishna to take him to the middle of the battlefield. So starting verse number 21, technically, Arjuna will ask Lord Krishna to take him to the middle of the battlefield, and from there will begin Arjuna's collapse. Right? Up till now, Arjuna is very confident. Suddenly he will collapse, and from there we'll start the wonderful discussion, the dialogue between Arjuna and Lord Krishna. So that thought will conclude today, and we'll start with this section.
So जी ये सुन के मुझे याद आता है कि when I was young, 11.5 years old, 1947, there was a fight between Hindu and Muslims. Hindu used to shout, Muslim used to shout, Allahu Akbar. इधर ओम नमः शिवाय, और उधर सिख बोलते थे कि ये सत श्री अकाल, जो बोले सो निहाल, सत श्री अकाल. So they are all like, conches. they were reassuring the people behind कि हम लोग हैं, आपकी रक्षा के लिए हैं। ये कौच ये भी रिप्रेजेंट करता है कि हम हैं, जो पीछे खड़े हैं हम हैं। और तो ये मुझे सीन इतनी अच्छी तरह याद है कि कैसे वही दोस्त थे हमारे और उनको हम लोग मार रहे थे, एक दूसरे को मार रहे थे। ये सीन मैंने अपनी आंखों से देखा हुआ है, मुझे दिल दहल जाता है जब वो सीन याद आता है। तो युद्ध का सीन, वो भी युद्ध का सीन था। आई वॉज इन अमृतसर एट दैट टाइम, विच वॉज अनडिसाइडेड कि पाकिस्तान में जाएगा कि हिंदुस्तान में जाएगा। तो ये जो कौच की आपने बात की तो मेरे को एकदम खटका के हमने भी वो युद्ध देखा हुआ है।
And all those conches, they were a tumultuous sound, wasn't it? मतलब, on the one hand, it was reassuring for the people, but it was also a sign for the terrible things that were to come. Absolutely. You've lived in a different time, sir. It's wonderful to hear your stories. Incredible.
मुझे युद्ध का जो भयानक एक समय होता है वो कभी भूल नहीं सकता, कभी नहीं भूलता।
Okay, any questions, anything else any would like to share before we conclude?
मैं तो इतना ही कहना चाहता हूँ कि देखो, मटेरियली दो चीजें होती हैं जिंदगी में। एक होता है कोयला, जिसको हम हाथ भी लगाना नहीं चाहते, वही कोयला
हीरा बन जाता है,
हीरा बन जाता है मेटामॉर्फिस से, व्हेन इट इज मेटामॉर्फ। अब मेटामॉर्फिस क्या है? सिंबॉलिकली ये ज्ञान ही है। ये ज्ञान हमारे को इतना मार मार के हम हीरा बनना चाहते हैं। आपका बहुत अच्छा आप बोलते हैं, मुझे बहुत गर्व है आपको सुन के, बहुत अच्छा लगता है।
हरिओम।
थैंक यू।
Hanji, any questions? If not, let's conclude and we'll see you on Thursday, 7 o'clock, same time.
Hari Om.
Hari Om. Thank you, sir.
Hari Om.